Imagine our beautiful planet filled with jaw-dropping views that pull adventurers in from every corner. Yet right there in those same spots, nature can flip the script and wipe everything out in seconds. Towns where the freezing air makes every breath feel like fire in your lungs. Tiny villages clinging to life amid constant threats from erupting volcanoes, raging storms, and even entire communities built right on shifting waters where danger lurks just steps from your front door. Spots where one wrong move spells the end are exactly where brave souls decide to call home. This journey isn't about Longyearbyen stands as more than some tiny settlement, holding under 1,000 folks. Way up near the Arctic Circle, it is a community living under bizarre laws you rarely find anywhere else on Earth. The craziest rule bans burials outright, since the frozen ground keeps bodies perfectly preserved for ages. Anyone facing their final days gets flown straight to mainland Norway instead. The brutal conditions do not stop at the surface, because from November through February, the sun vanishes entirely for months, creating endless night that triggers serious vitamin shortages, deep loneliness, and crushing depression for many. Back then, alcohol turned into a risky crutch, costing less than soda since taxes never touched it, so officials handed out ration cards to keep things under control. Just past the town limits, the big Tana Island welcomes people who build their lives right beside a volcano that has exploded almost daily for over 800 straight years. Mount Yasur keeps blasting ash, glowing rocks, and flames skyward dozens of times every single day, so the rumble of underground blasts becomes the everyday soundtrack for everyone there. Tourists see an unbelievable show, but locals face a non-stop hazard that can blanket whole villages in thick ash, poison their drinking water, and wreck precious gardens plus coffee farms in minutes. The danger on Tana stretches far beyond the volcano alone. Back in 2015, a monster Category 5 cyclone called Pam slammed into Vanuatu and flattened about 90% of the homes and buildings across the island. In a land where the earth can explode and storms can erase everything the smart residents watch, tiny clues from ants, birds, and shifting winds, then rush Tonle Sap. Lake operates nothing like an ordinary body of water. Instead, it acts as a living, floating universe that reshapes itself completely with every change of season. Hundreds of entire villages drift across its surface on sturdy houseboats, where families, schools, churches, police stations, and even small clinics all rest on clever bamboo platforms and metal drums. When the dry months arrive, the lake shrinks and sends water flowing back into the mighty Mekong River. But once the heavy rains return, it swells into a massive inland ocean, and sudden fierce storms whip up waves 3 feet tall, strong enough to flip those delicate floating homes and send years of treasured belongings sinking into the muddy bottom. Yet the harshest truth here goes beyond just the water, because thousands of families cook, bathe, throw away waste, and even use the lake itself as their bathroom. So when the water level drops in dry times, all that waste concentrates, foul odors fill the air, and sicknesses like diarrhea, cholera, and nasty skin infections become daily battles. Grindavik started as a quiet fishing village in southwest Iceland, but lately it has turned into the front line of a never-ending geological nightmare. Even before any lava showed up, locals spent weeks trapped in heavy mental stress, with thousands of earthquakes shaking the ground every day, destroying sleep and turning every night into pure terror. People heard concrete cracking and deep growling noises like something alive was stirring underground. By January of 2024, that dread became heartbreaking reality. The whole town got locked down. So many residents ended up in temporary shelters in Reykjavik, staring at cameras and live feeds as bright orange lava slowly swallowed their houses. They watched lifetimes of memories vanish on screens, completely powerless to stop it. The worst part is Grindavik is losing more than just buildings. It is watching an entire community identity built since Viking times slowly disappear forever under the unstoppable force of the earth. The Sahara stretches far beyond a simple ocean of sand. It becomes a brutal environment where intense heat strikes the human body like an invisible hammer. Ground temperatures can climb to 176 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to burn skin after just minutes of contact. Under the blazing sun, a person can sweat out an entire quart of fluid every hour, and without quick water, the blood thickens. The heart strains, and organs can start shutting down in under a day. Yet, the biggest killer in the Sahara is not only the scorching heat, because massive sandstorms can whip up walls of dust that blind you completely, and erase every sense of direction in minutes. Tiny particles invade your eyes, ears, and lungs, turning breathing into a real fight for life. Back in 1994, runner Mauro Prosperi got lost in one of those storms and survived 9 days by drinking his own urine and even bat blood before rescuers finally spotted him wandering near the Algerian border. Kibber clings to the high plateau like a brave settlement pushed right to the edge, where humans learn to share space with thin air, freezing cold, and months of total isolation. The village features sturdy stone and mud brick homes painted bright white, with deep red window frames that create a beautiful uniform Tibetan look. Yet behind that peaceful scene hides a merciless world, because winters here can plunge to minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit and bury every trail under thick snow. When that happens, Kibber turns into a lonely white island, completely cut off from the rest of the world for half the year. Close by stands the famous Chicham Bridge, crossing a canyon over 500 feet deep, showing just how risky travel between neighboring communities used to be. Before the modern bridge opened in 2017, locals from Kibber and Chicham had to cross that scary gap inside a handmade cable basket dangling high in the open air. Mesa Verde holds some of the toughest stories from the ancient Pueblo people, where whole groups once hid inside massive cliff walls for more than 700 years. They first lived on the open plateau, then slowly moved into huge rock shelters to survive a land that kept getting harsher every season. Even inside those protected spots, life stayed incredibly fragile, since fresh water was almost impossible to find, and everyone depended on tiny springs seeping from cracks in the stone. Around 1276, a terrible drought lasting 23 long years pushed the entire community toward total collapse as food ran out and fights broke out between rival Pueblo groups. Structures like Balcony House worked as both cozy homes and smart fortresses, with entrances so narrow only one person could squeeze through at a time to stop enemies. Archaeological finds even reveal violence that grew into killings and disturbing signs of cannibalism during those desperate times. Fuktal Monastery ranks among the most remote holy places on the planet, built straight into a cave, high on a steep cliff in the rugged Ladakh mountains. The whole complex uses simple mudstone and wood construction pressed tight against the mountainside, where it constantly battles falling rocks, erosion, and possible collapse. Every supply needed for daily life, including food and heavy gas cylinders, must travel by hand or pack animals along dangerous narrow trails beside sheer drops. More than 70 monks rely on one small stream flowing from inside the cave, so if winter freezes it or pollution hits, the monastery could lose its only lifeline. When heavy snow blankets the valley, the final supply path means crossing frozen river ice, where even a tiny crack can drag someone into rushing, deadly cold water below. Iquitos ranks as one of the most cut-off cities anywhere. And what makes it truly wild is nearly 500,000 people living there with zero road links to the outside world. It holds the title of Earth's biggest city, unreachable by any highway, so emergencies mean either expensive flights or long boat rides that can take days down the mighty Amazon River. Yet, isolation forms only the first danger layer, because in Iquitos, the line between city and jungle stays razor thin, and giant anacondas slipping into riverside houses happens more often than you think. Beneath the water, predatory fish and nasty parasites like candiru turn many river stretches into serious hazards for anyone. On land, humidity often tops 80 to 90%, creating constant sticky heat and moisture, where clothes grow mold, electronics break down fast, and bodies struggle to ever feel truly dry. Yangon, also called Yangon County, earns global fame as the narrowest city on the planet. But the real shock comes from how the entire place gets squeezed into a tight corridor between the rushing Yangtze River and towering mountain cliffs. From high above the town, looks like one long, thin ribbon of buildings glued tight to the rock and stretching along the river edge. At its skinniest spot, the city measures just 98 feet wide, yet somehow holds around 450,000 residents, leaving almost zero room for gardens or open spaces. Tall buildings rise on thin pillar legs like spider stilts, hanging right over the water. During rainy season, the river swells and races underneath the structures, turning the constant vibration into normal daily background noise. Even short trips become complicated because one blocked road section can force drivers into miles of detours, before they can loop back around. The Uros Islands form the highest movable reed fortresses on Earth, where families live on a surface that slowly breaks down right under their feet. Instead of solid stone or dirt, the ground consists of tightly woven totora reed roots, a soft, wet base that shifts and can sink if the top fresh layer grows too thin. That explains why the Uros people almost never get real rest, because every 15 to 20 days, they must add another thick layer of reeds to stop the islands from disappearing into marsh. Spending day and night on ground that never dries out takes a heavy toll wearing down bodies. So many adults battle constant joint pain and breathing troubles. Children often suffer from the biting cold and skin issues. While daytime sun at nearly 13,000 feet burns skin fast, but nighttime cold from the lake rises straight through the reeds, turning every home into an icy box. Most ironic of all, even surrounded by a huge lake, many Uros families still lack clean drinking water because the surrounding lake grows dirtier every year, slowly harming the health of the whole community. Shibam does far more than simply construct houses in the desert. It stacks an entire vertical city using one of the most delicate materials humans have ever trusted. Towering mud brick buildings climb as high as 16 stories above the dry land, creating a dramatic skyline that earned it the nickname Manhattan of the Desert. The incredible truth is these mud towers hold their own massive weight for hundreds of years, showing ancient engineering skills time has not yet beaten. Yet Shibam lives in permanent danger because the whole city uses mud and straw, so without constant care from people, it will slowly crumble away. Whenever heavy rains hit the mud, walls start washing away, forcing residents to climb scary heights to slap on fresh layers, plus a protective white lime coating on top. That white cap serves no decoration. It acts as the final shield, stopping water from soaking deep inside. If that top layer fails, an entire tower can tumble down like a child's sandcastle after a wave. Dirt summer down. Pripyat stands today as a frozen ghost town inside one of the largest and most hazardous exclusion zones on Earth, where humans face bans from living there for at least 24,000 years. After the nuclear meltdown, around 50,000 residents got rushed out in just hours, leaving behind homes, furniture, and everyday routines, turning the city into a perfect time capsule of Soviet life. The giant Ferris wheel in the old amusement park remains one of the strongest symbols because it was set to open on May 1st, 1986, but never carried even one happy child since the disaster struck 5 days earlier. The forest around the city turned reddish-brown and died quickly after soaking up massive radiation, making it one of the most poisoned spots ever recorded. Still, a few elderly locals quietly returned to nearby villages to grow food, drink local water, and keep living on tainted ground. When asked why they came back, many simply say, war and hunger never defeated them, so radiation would not either. Living in Sinel means building every part of daily life directly under a giant rock overhang that humans can never truly tame. From living rooms to kitchens and bedrooms, many houses sit right beneath boulders weighing millions of tons, so the feeling of safety always carries a quiet geological warning. But the wildness of Sinel stretches even further, because the narrow canyon creates huge differences in living conditions within just a few steps. In the shaded streets, the rock walls press close overhead and almost hide the sky, keeping everything below in cool shadow, even when bright sun blazes outside. Without direct sunlight, indoor humidity stays very high, making clothes hard to dry, encouraging mold, and filling rooms with the damp smell of stone and cave walls. Because of that, many families in Sinel still run dehumidifiers or heaters to fight the moisture, even on warm days when the temperature outside feels perfectly comfortable. Rebo sits alone at heights between 3,600 and 4,000 feet in the Indonesian mountains, like a hidden village floating among the clouds. Locals call it the village above the clouds, but the only way to get there is on foot since no paved roads, no cars, and no machines lead to the settlement. The isolation continues even after you arrive, because Rebo has zero cell signal, and electricity runs only a few hours each evening from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., using a noisy generator. Even visitors cannot simply walk in. They must first join a special Wayuu ritual at the main house called Nyang Gendang, where the village chief asks permission from the ancestors before welcoming anyone. At this height, humidity stays almost constant all year, and thick fog soaks into clothes, roofs, and beds, leaving everything damp cold and rarely ever fully dry. Castellfollit de la Roca counts as one of the tiniest towns in Spain, covering less than 4/10 of a square mile. Yet what makes this spot unbelievable is not its size, but the risky ground it sits upon. The whole village balances on a narrow cliff, caught between the Fluvia and Toronel rivers, as if the entire settlement rests on a thin rock ledge surrounded by flowing water. For thousands of years, these two rivers have slowly eaten away at the cliff base, gradually undermining the foundations from underneath. The super-limited space turns daily life into an intense form of closeness, where narrow, dark, twisting medieval streets feel like tunnels forcing everyone to live packed tight along the edge of a scary drop. In earlier times, even the dead stayed close, because the old cemetery once sat in a dangerous spot right on the rock before it finally got moved to safer ground. Lindisfarne, or Holy Island, works as a place where people cannot come and go on their own schedule, because the sea itself decides when the outside world connects again. Sitting off the coast of Northumberland in northeast England, the island links to the mainland only by a raised causeway that appears when the tide pulls back. Twice each day the tide rises and completely covers that road, turning Lindisfarne into an isolated community cut off from land for several hours, as if the connection suddenly vanished. Even with flashing electronic warning lights and posted tide charts, many visitors still try crossing, while water rises, leading to frequent rescue missions. Because of that, a wooden shelter hut stands beside the road for anyone trapped by the sea. With around 160 residents, daily routines here follow the rhythm of the tides, so emergencies work shifts, and even weddings must wait patiently until the sea allows passage once more. Pitcairn sits far out in the South Pacific like a lonely piece of land sliced away from the rest of civilization, and it stays one of the most distant communities on the entire planet, where distance turns even tiny accidents into life or death situations. Here, a small wound that seems harmless at first could become fatal, because residents sometimes wait weeks for ships sailing thousands of miles across open ocean just to reach medical help in Tahiti. And sadly, many never made it in time. Yet the isolation of Pitcairn did not start from medicine or location, but from a daring escape, when in 1789, after the famous mutiny on HMS Bounty, Fletcher Christian and his rebel sailors, Tahitian men and Tahitian women sailed here to disappear. At Bounty Bay, they burned their own ship to remove every trace and close off any return route to the outside world forever. Today, most Pitcairn residents trace their bloodlines straight back to that group, but the population stays extremely small. The gene pool keeps shrinking and aging. Locals now push the island closer to the real possibility of being abandoned all over again. Guyaju, often nicknamed the Mysterious Stone City, holds the record as the largest cliff-dwelling settlement ever found in China. The whole complex includes 117 hand-carved caves containing more than 350 rooms, all dug straight into solid granite cliffs. Experts mostly agree it served as a safe hideout for the wandering Kumoshi tribe during the chaotic 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period, when they fled wars and enemy attacks. Living here brought no comfort or safety, because the Yanjing area suffers harsh winters, with temperatures dropping below -4 degrees Fahrenheit, and granite holds almost no warmth, turning the entire place into a giant, cold storage room on the mountain. Even with heated kang beds, residents faced constant survival tests, needing huge piles of firewood to warm the stone rooms, while clever rain channels carved into the rock ceilings proved every drop of water mattered, and daily supplies had to be carried up steep paths from the mountain base below. Merapi earns the nickname Mountain of Fire, and that label feels completely real rather than just poetic. It stands as the most active volcano in Indonesia, with smaller blasts happening every 2 to 3 years, and bigger ones returning roughly every 10 to 15 years. The deadliest danger here comes not from slow lava flows, but from pyroclastic surges, superheated clouds of ash and gas hitting 1,290 degrees Fahrenheit, racing down slopes at hundreds of miles per hour and destroying everything in their path. After major eruptions, entire villages disappear under yards thick layers of ash and rock. The jeep roads tourists use today often drive straight across the buried roofs of those lost settlements. Despite knowing the risks, thousands of people still choose to live on Merope slopes because the volcanic ash creates incredibly rich soil that lets farmers grow 2 or even 3 times more crops than anywhere else in the region. Schafberg ranks among the most famous peaks in Austria's Salzkammergut region. Yet, its real wonder comes not just from the scenery, but from the huge human effort needed to reach the top. The heart of Schafberg beats through the Schafbergbahn-Cog railway, opened back in 1893, which still operates as Austria's steepest steam rack train. Building it demanded sweat and sacrifice because in the late 1800s, hundreds of workers hauled heavy steel rails weighing hundreds of pounds up slopes, reaching 26% using nothing but pure muscle and pack animals. The Schafberg Summit Hotel reveals another level of extreme living where high altitude and wild weather control every single link to the world far below. During brutal winters, or when fierce storms halt the trains, the staff can become almost totally cut off from civilization until the railway starts running again. Escher stands as one of the most daring restaurants anywhere on Earth, where one single slip could send you falling nearly 4,600 feet down the steep Alpstein mountainside. The building barely has a traditional back wall, because its entire rear side uses the natural rock face, while the angled roof lines up perfectly with the overhanging cliff above to dodge falling debris. But the exposed location forms only part of the daily challenge. For more than 170 years, Escher has run with water, coming only from collected rain, and groundwater seeping through the cave, creating real shortages during dry periods. Because of that, the place skips normal showers entirely. Every bit of trash, leftover food, and daily waste gets packed out and carried down the mountain while refrigerator supplies and repair parts arrive by helicopter, hovering close to the sheer cliff edge. Those tough limits created years of pressure that finally led the family running the spot for 31 years to walk away in 2018. Aogashima feels less like an island made for living, and more like a giant basalt crater where people somehow exist inside a tight volcanic bowl, ringed by cliffs rising 1,300 feet high. The island offers almost no safe harbor, so after boats unload, crews must crane them onto land because powerful waves can smash them apart in a single night. During the big eruption back in 1785, nearly 140 people died because they could not climb over the surrounding rock walls fast enough to escape lava and poisonous gases. Inside the central crater, the ground still releases geothermal heat reaching 390 degrees Fahrenheit, and residents cleverly use those vents for cooking and staying warm. Leaving the island stays highly uncertain since only one small helicopter flight usually runs each day, and if fog rolls in during a medical emergency evacuation might become impossible. The whole population depends completely on rainwater and desalination systems because no natural freshwater rivers, streams, or lakes exist when extreme conditions hit. Montserrat serves as more than just a monastery. It stands like a fortress of faith, clinging to the weirdest limestone peaks in Catalonia. Perched on Mount Montserrat, rising about 4,560 feet, whose name means serrated mountain, the monastery still operates today with 70 to 80 Benedictine monks, calling it home. Yet the true wildness of Montserrat goes beyond its height or rough terrain. At its historical peak, 13 separate hermit cells once dotted the sheer cliffs around the main buildings. Hermits lived inside tiny stone shelters, sometimes barely big enough for one person to lie down, cutting themselves off from the outside world for many years, while keeping almost total silence. Food came up from the monastery below using ropes and baskets, and historical records show some hermits lost their minds, while others fell from the cliffs during fierce storms because they saw isolation and danger as the fastest route toward God. Miyakojima turns the very air into a dangerous weapon thanks to its restless volcano, and here an ordinary breath can become deadly if you forget your gas mask. Mount Oyama releases huge clouds of toxic gas in a single day, enough that even brief exposure leaves throats, lungs, and eyes burning like they touched strong chemicals. The acidic air eats through everything much faster than normal, and while an iron beam might last 10 years on the mainland, here it can rust so badly people could break it by hand in just 1 or 2 years. About 1/3 of the island now sits inside a long-term restricted zone, where trees died standing and turned ghostly pale after toxic layers stripped them bare. With eruptions following a cycle of a few decades, residents live knowing whatever they build today could get buried again within days by fresh ash and lava. Even kids on the island train to grab gas masks fast, because the alarm sound decides exactly when they can eat, sleep, or run to survive. La Rinconada claims the title of highest city on Earth, sitting so high that human life feels rejected with every single breath right from the start. At an elevation around 16,730 feet, the air grows so thin, many residents walk around in constant exhaustion with blue lips and hearts working overtime just to keep them alive. Daily life twists even more because of the Cacorillo mining system, where workers labor 30 days without pay, then get only one single day to dig out as much ore as possible, knowing if they find no gold, the whole month ends with nothing. To extract the gold, many burn mercury inside small wind-sheltered shacks, filling the air with poison that slowly damages lungs and brains each day in exchange for the slim hope of sudden riches. Life above ground stays equally rough, since the town lacks any real waste system, letting garbage and human waste from tens of thousands of people pile up in the streets and turn into stinking mud when the sun finally warms things. In Oymyakon, human breath freezes almost instantly the moment it leaves your mouth, creating a faint crackling noise in air thick with extreme cold. This tiny village in Yakutia holds the record as the coldest permanently inhabited spot on Earth, with temperatures plunging to minus 96.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Here, stepping outdoors stops being routine and turns into a direct showdown with nature itself. Locals bundle up in as many as 20 layers of clothing, weighing nearly 31 pounds, just to stay safe for a short time outside. But the cold reaches deep underground, where permafrost hundreds of feet thick makes normal plumbing almost impossible to keep working. As a result, people cut big blocks of ice from frozen rivers and haul them home for water. Even cars fight to run because tires harden like rocks, and engines need hours of preheating before they will start at all. Tristan da Cunha goes beyond remote. It exists as a community totally separated from the usual pace of the rest of the world. Located in the South Atlantic Ocean, about 1,500 miles from South Africa, it holds the title of the most isolated inhabited archipelago on the planet. Reaching it means no airport, and only a long ship ride from Cape Town that takes 6 to 10 days with just a few voyages arriving each year. In 1961, the Queen Mary's Peak volcano erupted near the settlement, forcing nearly 300 residents to evacuate to England to escape danger. What stands out most is that once the volcano quieted down, almost the entire population chose to sail back to this lonely island instead of staying in a much easier life somewhere else. Ushkuli nestles deep in the Caucasus Mountains, like a community held tight between towering peaks. Heavy snow and a lifestyle almost untouched by modern times. Sitting at about 6,900 feet, it counts as one of the highest permanently lived-in settlements in all of Europe. Its most striking feature comes from the tall stone towers rising straight up throughout the village. Each tower works as both family home and private fortress built to protect against invaders and even fights between rival clans. Yet height is not the toughest challenge, because for around 6 months every year, snow falls so deep it buries the lower parts of many towers. The single road leading into the village often gets blocked by landslides or covered in snow, leaving Ushkuli almost completely cut off from the outside world. Henningsvær earns the nickname Venice of the North. Yet it feels more like a village forced to survive right on the edge of Arctic Ocean rock. Even its famous Idrettslag Stadium, often called the world's most scenic soccer field, is actually an isolated pitch built on bare stone, separated from freezing deep water by only a thin strip of asphalt, and no protective stands at all. For anyone not used to this setting, just 15 to 20 minutes of activity can bring nausea, dizziness, and total exhaustion, turning a normal game into a serious physical test against cold wind and salty air. The extreme side of Henningsvær stretches past the stadium because the whole village spreads across uneven rock outcrops and tiny islands, forcing schools, churches, and homes to squeeze into whatever narrow patches of land exist. When winter storms sweep over the small bridges connecting everything, even visiting a neighbor turns into a carefully planned journey against the sea's mood. Kuberpedi functions as an underground city where an entire community moved below the surface to escape the brutal desert heat. All around the town sit more than 250,000 unmarked mining shafts, creating a dangerous landscape where one wrong step can mean falling 100 feet straight down. During summer surface, temperatures can hit 175 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cause serious burns almost instantly, and even warp tires left sitting on the ground. Even underground dangers remain because the mining tunnels hold fine dust, sharp enough to damage lungs after long exposure. Above ground, almost no natural plants grow, so some residents added fake metal trees just to make the view less empty. The whole town depends on one single pipeline bringing water from faraway underground sources. Meaning even a small problem can cut off supply in no time at all. Masule was never built like a regular village. Instead, it rises as a steppe settlement tightly stuck to the steep mountainside in Iran. Motor vehicles stay completely banned here because the roads are actually the rooftops of the houses. Below, and those surfaces were never meant to hold the weight of cars or bikes. The idea of a private yard almost disappears because opening a window, or stepping outside means you stand right on your neighbor's ceiling. Really. The unusual part is these rooftop walkways use mainly mud, raw bricks, and wood. Yet and stay strong enough to support thousands of people crossing them every day for hundreds of years. Living in Mausole means spending your whole life climbing slopes because across the entire village, there is almost no truly flat ground. From heading to the market, carrying food-moving construction materials, to visiting a nearby house. Every daily task happens on a living system tilted at an angle along the mountain.